So good morning. I'm here today with Patrice Desrochers from Anderson to talk about baleage compared to dry. Good morning, Pat.
Yeah, good morning, Chris.
How are you today?
Really good, thank you.
Good, good. So what is baleage and how does it compare to dry?
Well, you have to know, first of all, that the biggest expenses for a dairy farm or a beef farm is the feed cost. Feed costs account for about two-thirds of the overall expenses on a farm. There's nothing closer to baleage than a cow grazing straight in the pasture, fresh grass, right? And if you're trying to reduce your expenses and grow up your bottom line, this is where you have to put your focus on is trying to get the best feed you could get for your cows. And this is what we're going to be talking about.
So what are the biggest challenges in traditional hay storage?
Traditionally, most, like, let's say beef farmers, they are doing dry hay. It's been like that for decades. Their father has been doing that and their grandfather as well. There's three downside to putting up dry hay. The weatherman versus the timing of cutting the plant at the optimal stage. There will be the harvesting losses and the storage losses. These are the three big things. If we first start with the weatherman and the timing of cutting grass, the main issue is the weatherman accuracy. If you look at the weather forecast for 24 hours, the accuracy would be 85% maybe. If you're looking for 48 hours, the weatherman accuracy is dropping down to 60%. And if you're trying to rely on the weatherman prediction for the next 72 hours, there's only 25% chance that the weatherman's going to be right. And when you're putting up dry hay, you need three consecutive nice days in order to be able to cut, let it dry down low enough in moisture content before you can put it up into a bales and store it and try to keep the most out of it. The problem with that is at the beginning, if you cut dry hay or if you cut baleage, which is high moisture hay, the first critical step is to cut the plant at this optimal stage. And the optimal stage is where basically when the buds is just starting to show up on the plant itself. And then if you're trying to put up dry hay and you see the buds are starting to come out of the plant, and then you look at the weather forecast and there's no three consecutive nice day for the next week, you have to wait. And then you wait for that window to open so you can cut and do all your stuff and bale it. But by the time you wait after the optimal stage of the plant until the time you can get into the fields and do everything peacefully, because there will be 3 consecutive days of nice weather, the protein content and the digestibility of the plant is going away really, really quickly. Versus if you're looking at baleage, that you can do everything in one day, cutting and baling and wrapping. It's a lot easier to match one nice day of weather along with the optimal stage of the plant than trying to align 3 nice days of nice weather along with the optimal stage of the plant. So that is the main issue with dry hay, that the probability you're going to have the optimal stage of the plant match with 3 nice days are really low, which you're not going to have with baleage. Second issue with dry hay will be the harvest losses. So, when you mow the grass, no matter if you do dry hay or you're going to be doing baleage, it's the same. You're cutting the grass with the same moisture level content, right? It's right off the ground, you cut it. But then as you let it dry, with the baleage, for example, you're going to be raking when the moisture is going to be around 50%. So the plant is more wet. The leaves are less fragile. So everything is fine. But when you're putting up dry hay, you need to let that moisture going down below 20. Normally closer to 12% moisture. And as it is drier, every time you touch mechanically the grass, you're losing yield, you're losing leaf, and the protein is in the leaf mainly. And so this is why when you put up dry hay, you have to ted it, you have to rake it at a lower moisture content level, and then you're going to be losing more during the harvest process than versus baleage. So that is the second part of it. And the last part, the last downfall of dry hay is the storage. So if you want to be able to store nice dry hay over a long period of time, you need to have the right moisture content in it, so as dry as possible. But also you need to store it. And a lot of people don't store it because they don't have the building to be able to store all the hay they put up together. So the dry hay is going to get rained on. And Storage losses, it's huge. It's probably, when I travel across Canada and United States, I see a lot of dry bales sitting outside, not covered, nothing, just rained on all the time. And in average, there will be like a 3-4 inches outer layer of the bales that's going to be spoiled right away. It's going to get brown. Cows will not eat it. They're just going to sort it out and go straight to the core of the bale. That 3-4 inch layer doesn't seems a lot, but every time I'll ask you, do you know what percentage of that 3-4 inch layer, outer layer, represent of the total amount of the bale?
No, I could probably guess maybe 5%.
It's much more than that.
Really?
It's much more than that. So on a 4 foot, let's say just for the assumption, if we're gonna do the math for 4, 5, and 6 foot bale, we in 3 cases we have the same 3-4 inch outer layer that's going to be spoiled away. On a 4 foot bale, that 4 inch is represent 30% of the total volume of the bale. On a 5 foot bale, it's going to be 25%, and on a 6 foot bale, it's going to be 20%. And you can easily do the math yourself. I'm sure a lot of people listening to what we're talking about will be like, "That's impossible." If you just put your algebra book back from the school and you look how to calculate the surface area of a circle of 48 inch, for example, 4 foot bale.
Yeah.
And then if you remove 4 inch on top and bottom, basically all around, then you have to calculate the circumference of the 40 inch circle. And if you do the surface area differences, then that's going to be 30% on a 4 foot bale. So there's a huge amount of grass or hay that's been lost just because of storage, which you would not have with baleage. So yeah, and this is basically 30% or 25%, depending on the size of the bale you're putting up. Let's say 25% that you're just working for nothing. You're just spending fuel, time, and wearing out equipment for nothing. And especially if you have a drought year, a lot of people would have wished, well, if I could have 25% extra bale, but you had it already, just because the technique you use did not allow you to keep it over a long period of time.
Do I need special equipment to do baleage?
You don't need any special equipment outside of a bale wrapper. On the other hand, then you don't have to ted your grass when you do baleage. So you're going to be saving on the tedding, but then you have to invest on the bale wrapper, which all along is pretty much the same money involved.
Okay. And so when would be the ideal time for me to cut for my baleage?
So when you do dry hay or baleage, timing is everything. It's all about capturing the optimal stage of the plant. So you have to look depending what you're growing. If it is a orchard or alfalfa or any type of Bermuda grass, for example, each plant have their own maturity stage, and you need to understand your plant when is the optimal stage where the protein content is going up and when the digestibility is going down. When both lines cross, this is where you need to cut it. A lot of people are just waiting. Oh, look, my field, I have really tall grass and we'll have a lot of yields, but it will be a poor yield. You're going to have a lot of volume, yes, but that volume will be empty of nutrients. So it worth nothing for cows. If you want to have the best bottom line for your farm, you have to cut it when the protein line and the digestibility meet with each other, and this is where you need to cut it. And that's going to be that will be normally where the buds or the early buds are showing up on the plant. This is where you need to cut it. So if you cut it at the right stage, you'll get about 19% protein, for example, with alfalfa. And if you wait a week later, then you could be down to 11, 10%. So each days you're losing money if you're not cutting at the right stage. And sometime, if you look at the weatherman, and even if you do hay in a day, if you look at the weatherman and they forecast rain for a week, and then you have only one nice day, which is tomorrow, and the bud did not show up yet, but you feel it's coming, it's better to cut the grass a day sooner than 5 days later.
So is there anything special I should be doing when mowing my forage?
So when you're doing baleage, and that advice is also as good for dry hay, we recommend to not cut too short to the ground. So normally we're trying to leave about 3 to 4 inch of stubble. I've seen farms where they're cutting really, really short to the ground, like less than an inch, which is not good because you're you're putting stones. Sometime with the mower, you're going to be smashing stones and throwing it into the windrows. So when you cut really close to the ground, you're adding foreign material into the crop. But also when you're cutting too short and then you collect that grass off the ground, if there's no rain coming for the next week, and that I've seen that happen a lot of time, you will almost burn your field because the stubbles are so short that they will not hold the moisture and the dew into the ground to favorize the regrowth of the plant. So in these cases, you will have your next cut in about 40 days. But if you cut at 3 inch off the ground, then you're going to keep more moisture close to the ground. The plant's going to regrow a lot faster, and your next cut's going to be in 28 days. So the cutting height from the ground is important. And also when you mow your grass for baleage, as I said, we want to avoid the thinning. So you're going to have to open up the baffle behind the mower. So the swath that you're going to laying down is as wide as possible. Normally you're able to reach up to 80% of the cutting width of a mower that's going to lay out right behind it. And we are basically using the solar drying effect as much as possible, which is free. And this is how you should cut your grass.
Okay. Is there anything special I should be doing when baling?
With baling, the same advice are recommended for dry hay. We're looking for tight bale. Why tight bale? Because the wrapping process, there's a fermentation process going on, and we want to get the most oxygen out of the bale. So having tight bale is the first step to make sure we are putting less oxygen into the tube when we're going to wrap it. And also we want to have a really consistent cylindrical shaped bale, really well shaped bale. I see a lot of bales that would be more like a conical shape, bigger on one hand versus the others. And it's all about how you drive over and how you balance the pressure within the bale chamber. But having consistent, nicely shaped bales does improve the fermentation process, because if your bales are not, if the seam between the bales are not the same or almost the same, you can create some air pocket in the joint, and that's not going to help the fermentation process. But if all your bales are nicely shaped, you won't have this air pocket, and then you're going to end up with a better result at the end.
Okay, perfect. So say once I'm done my baling, how long should I leave before I wrap my bales?
Sooner as possible will be the answer. We say sometime up to 24 hours, but as soon as you got it baled, the sooner you can wrap it is ideal.
And why?
It's all about the fermentation process. The first 2 days of the fermentation process is critical. It takes about 3 weeks for the fermentation process to be completed. And then if you don't move your bale right away, your bale, there's a lot of microorganism to the bale. Your bale's going to start to eat and so on. And you don't want that. And then you're also leaving your bales outside exposed to maybe rainfalls coming overnight. So you don't want that either. So you want to move the bales and wrap it as quick as possible so the fermentation process starts. And then this is where you're going to get the best value for your out of your bales. If you wait for too long, as I said before, the microorganism inside the bales going to start to activate themselves because you still have oxygen keeping them alive. And then the internal temperature of the bale is going to go up. There's like a sweating process where the heat is going up. And there's several studies that prove that if you wait for too long and the heat is going too high, the protein content you did catch up at the right stage when you cut it, it's going to bound itself and will not bound with the fiber, and it will not become digestible for the cows anymore. So even if you cut it at the right stage, if you wait for too long, you're going to lose this digestibility if you're not wrapping quick enough. So the nice thing when you wrap bales, if you have like a inline wrapper, you have to move the bales because you wrap at the farm, basically near the building where we're going to feed the cows, right? So that's not a big thing, because what I want to say is with the inline wrapper, once it's wrapped, you don't touch the bale anymore. However, if you opt for infill wrapping, like if you have an individual bale wrapper or maybe a combination baler wrapper that you bale and wrap in one operation into the field, you also have to move these bale as quick as possible. It's not because it is wrapped. For sure, if you bale and wrap in the field because the rain is coming and there's no other choice for you, it's better than nothing. But if there's no rain coming, don't leave your bales sitting in the fields for 4 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before moving them, because the fermentation process will happen in the field. And then, when the bales are fermenting, you're going to see the shape of the bale. You won't recognize the shape of the bale. The plastic is going to inflate because there's some gas generation inside the bales. And the day you're going to come to pick them up with a squeezer, you're going to squeeze it, and then the gas is going to need to go somewhere, and it will find its way through the layers of the film. And that's that glue between the layers that make the film oxygen tight. Basically, you're going to break that seal, because when you squeeze the bale, the gas is going to need to go out. And then when you break that seal, of course, it's going to seal back, but not as good. And then the fermentation process will be perturbed a little bit. You will have to start over again. And this is why we see a lot of individual wrap bales that they don't smell as fresh and greener than bale wrap in a tube, because when we put them with the inline wrapper, we don't touch it anymore. So the grass is going to be in almost same condition in the day you pick it up from the field.
Okay, thanks, Pat. And so how many layers of film would you suggest on my inline?
So inline wrapper or individual bale wrapper, we're looking for the same amount of layers. If you look at every plastic film manufacturers, they will not guarantee their product if you're putting less than 6 layers. So 6 is the bare minimum. Normally, if it is your first experience with the baling high moisture hay, it's better to put more. If you look at the inline wrapper, the cost per bale, it's about $3 film per bale. And then sometimes if you're just trying to cut one layer, you're trying to save money, you're saving like 20 cents, 30 cents a bale, and you're gambling with the value of one bale. And what a bale of baleage worth in a season? $100 a bale, maybe. So are you really trying to gamble 50 cents over $100? It doesn't make any sense. So you can start with at least 8 layers, let's say, to start with. If it is your first time, you start with 8 layers. The goal is you don't want to see through the film. You don't want to see the grass behind the film. If you're seeing through, it's not good. Either your plastic is not a good brand, and so on. But we want to have this nice finish, white finish, and you don't see anything through. If you see something through, like a piece of grass or anything like that, this will attract birds. For example, they will believe it is a worm. They're going to land on your bales and try to punch the film to get that worm out until they realize it is grass. So, but if it is nicely wrapped and you don't see anything, it's completely white, then you're going to save a lot of trouble down the road. Of course, 6 layers or let's say 8 layers on the inline wrappers versus individual bale wrappers, there's a big cost difference. Inline wrapper, you're saving 50% of the film versus individual bale wrapping. So which is quite important to consider also when you're going to select eventually your bale wrapper. Of course, individual bale wrapper, there's really affordable models, but then you have to keep in mind that it's going to cost you twice the amount of plastic versus inline wrapper that might be a bit more pricey at the beginning, but then on a yearly basis, you're cutting by half your plastic expenses.
Now, does color of plastic matter?
There is a lot of talk and discussion around that. There's no study that has proved that one color is better than the others, that I've read, at least to my knowledge. I know there's a lot of people saying, well, black film is better. Maybe, but I never seen any significant difference between white and black film. And the problem with black film is the shelter life. There's not a lot of black film used in the market. So if you're able to buy black film, you have to ask yourself how long this film has been sitting on the shelf, because the film has a shelf life as well. Over a certain period of time, the glue inside the rollers won't stick as good anymore. And then I would not recommend it. So it's better to go for white film because they has a higher rotation on the shelf. So you're going to end up with a plastic that was not made too long ago. And also regarding the brands, there are several brands. I will say talk with other farmers about which brand they are using and they're happy with, because some brand has been good a year, the year after it's been bad because it changed the chemical component of the film and so on. but just be careful. Don't buy the cheapest plastic. That will be my best advice. It's better to spend 50 cents more film per bale and keeping all your crop than trying to save 50 cents and gambling all your crop basically, because that's a feed. That's what's going to feed to your cows. You know.
That's fair enough.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe to our channel for the latest episodes, tips, and guides on maximizing your equipment's performance. If you want to learn more about wrapping hay, speak with your authorized Anderson dealer or contact us at info@grpanderson.com.